participants of students and other colleges, and my dear lovable friends. It gives me immense pleasure in welcoming you all to the webinar on text, textuality and discourse. At the outset, I extend my warm welcome to our chief guest, Dr. Amitabh Vikram, School of Language and Literature, Shri Mata Vaishno Devi University in Jammu Kashmir. I have to express my heartfelt welcome to our Secretary, Dr. Mahendran Sir, the Principal, Dr. N.R. Shanti Maheshwari Ma'am, the Director, Dr. G.Venkataswamy Sir, and our HOD G. Kameshwari Ma'am, for providing all possible help for organizing this webinar. My special welcome to staff members and students for various institutions for joining us in this memorable occasion. Finally, I'm happy to welcome respected staff members and my dear friends for helping us in organizing this event. I'm fully confident that this event will mark an ever memorable program in history of our department. Once again, I welcome you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mamta. Next, I would like to invite Ms. R. Venkataman from First MA English to deliver the brief introduction.
Hi, Honorable President here. I would like to introduction about the chief guest into the webinar. Amitabh Vikram Dwivedi is a Harvard University certified in the art of writing and public speaking and university faculty specialized in linguistics and literature in the School of Language and Literature at Shri Mata Devi University, India. His research interests include language documentation, writing descriptive grammars, and the preservation of rare and endangered language in South Asia. His published books are found in the libraries of University of Stanford and Princeton. He has also been a co-director for a research project entitled A Comprehensive Study of Culture, Philosophy, Literature and Language, sanctioned by Indian Council of Social Science Research. As a poet, he has published numerous poems in different anthologies, journals and magazines worldwide. Thank you so much for giving me this wonderful opportunity to give me the chief person introduction. Thank you, Ananda.
Thank you, Ms. Venkataman. Without further ado, let's learn about text, textuality, and discourse from our research person, Dr. Amitabh Vikram Dwivedi. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Kartika, and I welcome all the participants who are here. And as you know, that I'm going to talk on the topic titled "Text, Textuality, and Discourse," and I have also prepared a slide that I would like to share, and then I will continue my presentation so that entire thing will be quite comprehensive for you. And I hope now all of you are able to see the slide. And here we start with the title, "The Text, Textuality and Discourse." So at the surface level, we can see that in this talk, we'll be dealing with three things: text, textuality, and discourse. Though they look three different things, but the point is that how they are interlinked and interrelated to each other. So this text, or this topic and this session will be useful for whosoever is interested in literature, in language, applying linguistic principles to literature when it comes to analyzing a text. So we will also discuss how we can analyze a text better. And there is also a possibility that some of you might have already attended my previous lecture, because I have discussed this topic in a couple of seminars as well. So I'm sorry for that, those who find that I have already discussed this topic previously, but again, you will find certain things which I have added to this presentation, into this session. So when we start with text and textuality, it is always a good thing that we try to go into the etymology. So those who do not know what is etymology, etymology is the scientific study of words, origin, how words they get origin, from which language, from where. So in etymology, generally we study the origin of the word. So when we take into consideration a topic, it is always a good thing that we should go for the definition that is associated with that particular text. So when it comes to defining a topic, then there are two things that we need to consider. First is the denotation and another one is connotation. Now, how these two are different from each other, at the same time, how they give insight into the topic. So when it comes to denotation, and denotation is generally meant by the dictionary meaning that we have of a particular discipline or a word. So when we try to look at the dictionary meaning of what is text, then any standard dictionary will provide us with this information that something that is written or printed in terms of content rather than physical form is a text. Now, important thing here is that we, though we are looking at the denotative meaning, but still one thing is clear, that content is more important than a physical form. The traditional knowledge of a text is like a book that we have. For example, for students, textbook means the book that a person studies in a curriculum, in a course. But here we are using that extended, that we are not limited to the physical form, but we are concerned about the content. And when we talk about this content, then we are more concerned about the meaningfulness. So content is directly associated with meaningfulness. We are not concerned about the form, but we are more concerned about what meaning a particular form is conveying. This is the starting point, and this is the dictionary definition. At the same time, when we look at the connotative meaning that are associated with the text, so whereas denotative meaning is associated with the dictionary meaning, connotative meaning is the additional meaning that is associated with that particular word. So we find that this word text has been derived from Latin root textus. So this is one information that we get. And when we try to find out what is the meaning of this Latin root textus, then we find that textus means tissue or literary style. So again, an extension to the meaning, dictionary meaning only provides us with this content in terms of content rather than the physical form. But here now we have extension of this meaning, and we have tissue that is associated with that and literary style that is associated with that. Now, what is tissue? Now, tissue, when we think about this entire concept of tissue, then the concept of thread comes into our mind. So we have lots of thread, and why we use thread? We use thread for a fabric. So, we have a wool and we have a knitted sweater. So that tissue is there, and when everything is knitted or woven fine, then we have a texture. So this is one important thing. But how this tissue, fabric, woven, everything is associated with text, that is again important thing. So here we have that one meaning is also associated with literary style. Now, when we look at something that is literary, when we look at words, when we look at a novel, a play, a poetry, non-fiction, an essay or an editorial, we find that everything is in black and white. We find that there are words, and these words are woven together. And they are woven together in a manner that we have a texture, and not only a texture, but we have different type of styles. So when we say what makes a literary text, that means there are certain words, those words are woven together in such a manner that we have a literary text. So this is the concept of text that we have, and we will keep this thing in our mind, that what is text. Now, another word that is associated with text is textuality. Now, text is a noun, and when we say textual, then it becomes adjective, and when we say textuality, then again we have a noun. Now, in this word textuality, then ity is important, because this ity suffix has some important meaning associated with that. So when we have this ity electricity, again we have this ity. So this ity is this quality of being something. So quality of being electric becomes electricity, and quality of being a text, that quality is responsible for making a text, then it is the textuality. So text, if it is in a physical form, then we can see it, we can perceive it. Even something comes in terms of content or meaningfulness, then obviously we know that it is written in language, we can read language, we can perceive it, we can understand it, we can hear, and then we can find out the meaning. So something that is a text can be perceived. So this palpability is very much associated with the text. But when it comes to textuality, this quality is something invisible. So that invisible thing we need to find out as a critique, as a literary scholar, or as a meaning finder, because all of us are meaning finder in a way. When we communicate with each other, we try to find out the meaning of that conversation. We try to find out what is there for me. If something is not there for me, then the things becomes boring for us. So this thing is quite important, that something that is invisible that we need to find out. So that quality we need to find out, and I will tell you those how you can find out that quality. How can you find out something that is invisible, something that you can't perceive from your sense organs? At the same time, we also need to remember that text cannot occur in isolation. Text means something that is said, something that is unsaid, but something that is compulsorily conveying some meaning. Oral, verbal, non-verbal, whatsoever it is, but something that is conveying us any type of meaning, that becomes a text for us. So don't confuse that text is only something that is in black and white, something that is written, something is in language. It's not the case. Something that is beyond language can also become a text. But the only condition is it must convey some meaning to us. And as I said, that text cannot occur in isolation. Then what? Text must occur in a context. So we need to have an eye to find out what is the context. So if we are well versed in finding out the context, then we can read any type of text. So with this, we start and we proceed further. So text can be a literary text, and we know that literature, when we talk about literature, particularly something in written, so the concept of literature we have, it's something that is in a published form, in a written form, that is literature, though we have oral literature as well. But majority of things that we consider as literature, once it is in language. So language is the compulsory thing for literature. At the same time, if you keep these two things side by side, literature and language, then you find that language is primary and literature is secondary. Now, what do I mean by when I say language is primary and literature is secondary? Because there cannot be any literature without language. So if you need to have a literature, you must have a language. Without language, literature is not possible. So language resource, that is one thing. And because we have a language resource, so literature is also a textual form. And when I say a textual form, then again I am talking about those metaphors, a thread, and how it is woven finely. That metaphor is important. So again, we have a fine text that has a texture and that is nicely woven, and literature has a literary style. So literature is an object of study. There is no doubt about it. We study literature in master's program, bachelor's program. People do PhDs in literature. So literature we read for fun, we read for entertainment, but at the same time, literature is also a discipline and object of study for us. And language is responsible for literature. If there is no language, there is no literature. So language becomes the medium of the text. But at the same time, language is also an object of study. There are hundreds of languages spoken in India. You can work on any language. What are the sounds that are there in the language? What type of words that are there in the language? What is the syntax of that particular language? So language is a medium. At the same time, language is also an object of study. So language is also a discipline. And linguistics, that is the meta language. So we say something about the language. For example, if I say pa, then pa is not simply a sound, but pa is also bilabial. Pa is also a voiceless sound, and pa is also a plosive. So three information I have simply for this sound pa. So this information I get when I study linguistics formally. So like when I say pa in English language or pa in any other language is a plosive, voiceless, bilabial, that I am using language to talk about language. So in that manner, linguistics is the meta language. So all these three things, literature, language, and linguistics, they are interconnected with each other. So this is a basic concept because we will use these things in the future slides. So I hope that this understanding all of you need to have. Now we will see that how this text is actually woven, because we have said like text is like a thread, text is like a wool, and we have used this metaphor of fabric. So we must be curious that how this text is actually woven. When we say literature has a literary style, so we want to know like what is this literary style that we have. So for that, I have taken an excerpt from Shakespearean sonnet, and the first two lines of the Shakespearean sonnet that I have taken, the title of the Shakespearean sonnet is "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" So this is the first line, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate." This is the second line. So when I say how text is woven, then there is a thing that is known as syntagmatic relationship. So we need to understand syntagmatic relationship. So we have two types of relationship, and these relationships were given by Ferdinand de Saussure in his book titled "A Course in General Linguistics," published in 1916. And these two types of relationships, syntagmatic and paradigmatic relationships, are actually semantic relations. That means these relations are associated with meaningfulness. So we also know something that is written in front of us must be meaningful. It must convey some meaning. And what makes literature a literature? That is, meaningfulness in literature is never exhausted. So these words, listen to these words quite carefully, that meaningfulness in literature is never exhausted. So 100 times you read one line and you will get one new meaning. So that means like there is endless process of reading, meaningfulness, and interpretation that we have. So you can interpret a thing in numerous ways. So meanings are never exhausted. But once we read an editorial in a newspaper, once we read newspaper or like some magazine or pulp fiction, then meaning is exhausted. There is one or two meaning, but not more than that. So these two relations we will talk about. One is syntagmatic relationship. And what is that syntagmatic relationship? That is the relationship on the horizontal axis. So when I say, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" that means shall and I, they must come in this particular order. I and compare thee to a summer's day. That means like there is a word order that we need to follow. If I need to make it a question, here it is a rhetorical question. So if I need to make it a question, I must put auxiliary here. I cannot say "I shall compare thee to a summer's day." And if I say "I shall compare thee to a summer's day," then it will not be a question. So this syntagmatic relationship is quite important. So shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. So how one word interacts with other word and they come in particular order so that it becomes, let's say, imperative, interrogative, declarative, exclamative, or any type of construction. So here this syntagmatic relationship is important in English language. At the same time, we have paradigmatic relationship. Paradigmatic relationship is on the vertical axis. It occurs on a vertical axis. So in place of saying, shall I compare thee to a summer's day, I can also say, shall I compare thee to a spring's morning? There is no problem in that. I can also say, thou art more beautiful and more calm, in place of saying, thou art more lovely and more temperate. So what is this? I can change lovely with beautiful. I can change shall with will. I can say, will I compare thee to a summer's day? What difference did it make? Not much. So these type of substitutions, they are available at paradigmatic level. Now, why writer has made this particular line, the first line, as a rhetorical question? Because it is in the mind of the writer. But writer is intuitively aware of both the syntagmatic and paradigmatic relationship. Writer knows that if I want to make it a rhetorical question, writer can make it. That is very well. And writer, no, I do not want to use this word beautiful, but I want to use the word lovely. Oh, I don't want to use the word day. I want to use the word morning. So all these choices are available with the writer. Though writer is not actually aware of what is syntagmatic or what is paradigmatic, but writer knows the language very well, and writer internalized all such things and can use them. So we talked about two axes of semantic relationship. One is syntagmatic, that is on the horizontal axis, and one is paradigmatic, that is on the vertical axis. So paradigmatic relationship is also known as the relationship of contrast and substitution. Now this contrast and substitution is a really interesting thing, because when you compare that, why writer has used summer's day? Obviously, because writer is not living in India, but writer is living in UK. Fine. So obviously, in India, no one will compare the beloved with the summer. Writer will not say, shall I compare thee to a summer's day, because the summers are very hot, very terrible. So we can't use a comparison of a beloved with the summer. We can say, shall I compare thee to a spring's morning? Then it is fine. Okay, no problem in that. So culturally, summers are quite pleasant in Europe. So that's why summer is used here. So why summer is used, not spring is used, and spring and summer here, they are occurring in contrast. That means writer has a mindset, writer wants to use summer only. That's why writer is using summer. Writer has a mindset, writer wants to use lovely and not the beautiful word, beautiful. That's why writer is using lovely. So this paradigmatic relationship is actually the relationship of contrast and substitution. So all the words that we have in our mental lexicon, they are in contrast and substitution. We have choices. So we have these choices that we can make. So in place of laugh, we can say risible. So we know that risible means also laugh, but we want to say laugh. We know like in which situation we can say risible and in which situation we can say laugh. So that saying, that thinking about the situation and saying a particular thing, that is also because contrast and substitution. And when we talk about a syntagmatic relationship, then it is a relationship of combination and co-occurrence restriction. So we combine words like John loves Mary. Now it's a combination. So John is a noun, loves is a transitive verb, and Mary is another noun. And if I change the word order and if I say Mary loves John, then obviously the meaning is different. Then the meaning is not John loves Mary. And if I say John, Mary loves, then you will say no. This combination is not allowed in the English language. So we have this co-occurrence restriction that we know that the basic word order of the English language is subject, verb and object, and we need to follow that. So that falls under syntagmatic relations. So every literature, everything, any text in a language that occurs and that is a resultant of these two relations, semantic relations, one is paradigmatic, another one is syntagmatic. So I would like to show you that these two relations, they not only occur once we use a sentence only, but it occur at word to word level as well. So first we will see that at sound level how it occurs. So for example, as you can see that here we have three words, cat, sat and mat. And if I raise a question, what is the difference in these three words? You will say only the first initial sound is different. Cat is cat because the first sound is kha. Sat is sat because the first sound is sa. Mat is mat because the first sound is ma. So you know that when to use ka sound initially, sa sound initially and ma sound initially. So again, this is a relationship of contrast and substitution at sound level. So one sound difference makes differences in meaning here in this particular example. At stylistic level, you can also make this contrast and substitution. For example, if you write a poem, the sun is shining bright, this is a lovely sight. So you know that the end rhyme is bright. And if you are following end rhyming, then you need to use something that must rhyme with bright. So when I say this is a lovely, and if I say this is a lovely thing, then thing is not rhyming with bright. So we must use sight or such type of word that must rhyme with bright. So at a stylistic level, again, we have this contrast and substitution. And at syntactic level, we already know the cat sat on the mat. So you can change the cat and you can say the dog sat on the mat, or you can say the dog sat on the couch, or you can say the cat slept on the mat, or the cat slept on the couch. So these differences you can make, and this entire language is simply a play of these two semantic relations, paradigmatic and the syntagmatic. So when we talk about how text is woven, then we must not forget that these two relations, they play a crucial role once we have a resultant, a poem, a novel, a language, or anything that is written in a language, irrespective of the fact whether it is spoken or written. So when we study syntagmatic and paradigmatic relationship, then this concept of sign is also important. And as I said, that Faninandi Saussure wrote a book titled A Course in General Linguistics in 1916, and in that, at one place, Saussure said, everything depends upon relations. So we know that how relationships are important in our life. We know like what roles our parents, our partner, our children, and the people who live around us, they play. So that thing is already there in our mind. But Saussure says that everything depends upon language in terms of language. Not society is talking about, he's talking about language, that everything depends upon relation. You may cross question how. So there is one thing that one sign interacts with other sign interacts with other sign, and it is an endless process. Sign, the concept of sign, you can consider a word as a sign. You can consider a morpheme as a sign. So the sign interacts with other sign. So when I say John loves Mary, and if you look at this middle word loves, then love interacts with the S. So what is the significance of this S? The significance of this S is that it tells us that the thing that I have said, John loves Mary, is in present tense. That is first thing. At the same time, this S also gives us information that subject is third person singular. So that information we also have. So this is because the interaction between love and the letter S So this thing goes on endlessly when we use language. So this is the meaning of, like, when I say everything depends, the Saussure says that everything depends upon relations. So how in language everything depends upon relations. At the same time, Saussure uses a metaphor and says that signifier and signified are two sides of a piece of paper. So what is this concept of signifier and signified? So signifier is something that is spoken, and signified is something that is conceptual. So when I say dog and you think about a dog, any dog you can think of Alsatian, you can Pomeranian, you can think of bulldog, you can think of any dog, you can think of your street dog as well. So the dog and the concept, so signifier is same for all. If there are 80 people in this session, and if I say dog, then all of you think of one particular dog or any type of image of dog that you have. So that is your signified, and signifier is one. So signifier and signified are two sides of a piece of paper. That means once you a sign has a signifier and signified, and they are like two sides of a piece of paper. Because if I say define a paper, then you will say a paper must have two sides. If there is only one side, then it is not a paper. So similarly, sign is a sign because sign has inherently a signifier and signified in that. So every sign has a signifier and signified, and there is a possibility that one signifier has more than one signified. There is a possibility. For example, if I say bird, think of a bird. How many of you have thought of penguin? How many of you have thought of ostrich? No. So you have thought of crow, you might have thought of a pigeon or any other bird, eagle, but not ostrich and penguin. Why? Because you are not seeing penguin and ostrich in day-to-day life. Or how many of you have thought of kiwi? Kiwi is also a bird. No. Why? Because these are not prototypes for us. We are not seeing them usually. So these signs, they interact with each other, and the sign that has inherently signifier and signified, and this entire relationship goes like this. So in this slide, we will see how this text is constituted. So we have a phoneme, then we have more than one phoneme, then becomes morpheme. So here, like, phoneme is a b. So phoneme is the minimal meaningful sound unit in a language. And morpheme, so we have these four sounds, but two morpheme, bat and s. We mix them, we have a word like bats. Then we have a phrase like, here it is an example of a noun phrase, a determiner and noun, bats. Then we have clause, while it is proved the bats harbor viruses. And we have a sentence, it is proved that the bats harbor viruses. So what is the difference between clause and sentence? Generally, a clause must have only one verb and a subject, but a sentence can have more than one subject and more than one verb. So that is basically the linguistic difference between clause and sentence. So here you can see, like, we have started with the minimal sound unit, and we have reached to a maximum, to a sentence. So this is how this text is constituted. And if we have more than one sentence, then, so here, like, we stopped at one sentence. It is proved that the bats harbor viruses. But beyond sentence, what? So beyond sentence, we have now two sentences here. Wash and core 6 apples, put them in a bowl. Two sentences, but these two sentences are interdependent upon each other. And I've taken these two sentences from a book titled Cohesion in English by Halliday and Hassan. So what we see, that these two sentences are comprehensible to us. Though the first sentence and the second sentence, that is subjectless, because they are imperative sentence. So irrespective of the fact that they are subjectless, but they are quite meaningful to us. And not only meaningful, but they are interrelated to each other, linked to each other. Because of this, there is a cohesive relation across sentence boundary. So one sentence is wash and core 6 apples and put them in a bowl. And if I say what is them here, then you will say 6 apples. You are talking about 6 apples. I said, how did you come to know that them is 6 apples? Then you will say, that them is getting its meaning from the previous sentence. So them, for meaningfulness, them is in the search of a meaning, and for that them crosses the sentence boundary and reaches to 6 apples, and 6 apples very happily gives its meaning to them. So the meaning is wash and core, you wash and core 6 apples and you put 6 apples in a bowl. So there is a cohesive relationship across boundary, and linguistically speaking, when we have more than one sentence and those 2 sentences which are associated with each other, then we have a discourse. So we are not taking into consideration Foucault's definition of discourse, where Foucault says that discourse is a system of thought. Here we are taking the linguistic definition, that how one sentence and the second sentence, or likewise, they are independent upon each other. So again, we revise this definition that we have studied of a text, that text is something that has a texture. And when we talk about texture, that means we are talking about it is finely woven. So now there is one problem also with this connotative meaning, that when we say it is finely woven, then it suggests like something that is very coherent, integrated collection of sentences. Is it so? Is it the only definition of text? If something is not coherent, if something that is not integrated, can it not be a text? So we will look at that type of example. So for that, I have selected these 3 examples. Now the first example is Tolstoy, War and Peace. Second example is a road sign, stop. And third example is colorless green ideas sleep furiously. Now this, let's talk these examples one by one. So Tolstoy, War and Peace. So think of a situation that you are walking, you are just going to your class and you wish your teacher good morning, and your teacher replies Tolstoy, War and Peace. What will be your reaction? You will be flabbergasted, you will be like surprised at what happened to my teacher. I am greeting my teacher good morning, but in reply teacher is saying Tolstoy, War and Peace. So here this particular example is something that is not coherent and something that is not integrated collection of sentence. So again, you will say then Tolstoy, War and Peace is not a text at all. You can say this thing, but at the same time you need to think of that you have borrowed Tolstoy, War and Peace from your teachers 2 weeks ago, and teacher has given you a couple of reminders to return back my book, my text, but you are not returning. And one fine day when you greeted your teacher good morning, your teacher said, I don't give a damn to your good morning, Tolstoy, War and Peace first. Now what do you say? That means now it is perfectly a text. It is not a sentence at all, not the thing happening in a coherent manner. The reply of good morning is Tolstoy, War and Peace. So this thing is quite important. We need to understand that this connotative meaning, that something that is perfectly woven, something that is quite coherent, something that is integrated collection of sentences, is not solely responsible for the creation of a text. We have something else. So similarly, there is a road sign stop, but this road sign stop is meaningful when it is a road sign stop. Fine. And if it is just outside your outside on the door of your home, stop, it has no meaning. Like you will be surprised, like what does it mean that outside you have stop? Similarly, this final example, colorless green ideas sleep furiously. This example is from Noam Chomsky's book titled Syntactic Structure, published in 1957. Now, when you look at this colorless green ideas sleep furiously, you find that it is a perfectly coherent sentence. A sentence that is grammatically correct, because ideas, they are plural, so you have a plural verb sleep, and you have an adverb that is modifying verb that is furiously, ideas that is green is your adjective, and then you have a modifier colorless. So everything is so neat and clean and grammatical that you don't have any problem with the grammar. But if I raise a question that what do you mean by colorless, green, ideas, sleep furiously, you say I don't know. It is meaningless, because something that is green or something that is a color cannot be colorless. Or even if you have an idea, you can't say that today I have a red idea, yesterday I had a black idea. You can't say like this. And even if you have an idea, ideas don't sleep. Animate things, they sleep. And if you sleep, you sleep calmly, peacefully, but not furiously. So again, it is grammatically okay, but it is not appropriate. So that means in order to be a text, we not only have to take care of the form, but we also need to take care of something else. And what is that something else? Something else is the context. So if I use colorless, green, ideas sleep furiously in a linguistic class, when I am teaching meaningfulness, when I am teaching appropriate and inappropriateness, when I am teaching that what is the difference between appropriateness and grammaticality, then this example is very much meaningful because it is occurring in a context. So similarly, Tolstoy, War and Peace becomes meaningful when it occurs in a context. So context, in order to ascertain something is a text or a not only the language form. So language form is not that important than the context in order to ascertain that something is qualifying as a text or not. So we know that how text becomes a text when text occurs in context. So when text occurs in context, then text becomes a text. And not only any context, because there are millions and billions of contexts, but when text occurs in a knowable context, then text becomes discourse. So according to Bhaktin, this discourse is concrete living totality. So when something is said, when you read something on a piece of paper or anything you say or hear, you use all the permutation combinations of that particular language that you know as a concrete living totality. Try to find out the meaning of that thing. So this, we know that how text transforms itself into discourse when it occurs or it realizes into knowable context. So we have studied what is text, we have studied what is context, we have studied, we have seen that what is discourse. But now, is it possible that a text can be decontextualized? Yes, the answer is yes, a text can be decontextualized. How is it? I hope that all of you must have read this wonderful book by Paulo Coelho, The Alchemist. The first line is, the boy's name was Santiago. Now, this is the first sentence, but here it is coming outside the text. So what I have done, I have decontextualized this thing. The boy's name was Santiago. Assuming a situation like I am teaching the starting lines of the novels, and I can say that you can also start a novel with a very simple sentence like this, that the boy's name was Santiago. So this can also be a writing style. This can also be a starting of a novel. And for that purpose, I have decontextualized this sentence for this particular purpose. So yes, the answer is that you can decontextualize a text, and all the time when we are using quotation marks or we are quoting something or someone, irrespective of the fact whether we are writing academic for academic journals or we are writing for thesis, what do? We quote them, we cite them. At the same time, if you are writing for the examination, then also you write. So more the citation, more the quotation, more references, it shows that your study is in depth. So your study is very deep. So that is the thing, like text is always decontextualized. There is no problem in that. Now we will add a new viewpoint, a literary viewpoint in these three terms, these three concepts: text, context, and discourse. And we are taking into consideration Stanley Fish's this famous anecdote that once what happens that there is a student, and that student comes to Stanley Fish and raises this question. And what's the question? Is there a text in this class? So it's like a normal situation that we can also face, that a student is coming immediately after the first class and asking us, is there a text in this class? So what we will understand that, okay, the student is asking about the names of the book. The student is asking about the titles of the books. So similarly, Stanley Fish assume that, okay, the student is asking about the titles, and he starts giving a particular student the titles of the book. Okay, this text, this text, this text. The student stops. No, I am not interested in that. I am interested in, is there a text in this class? So a student in this particular situation is more interested in the theoretical viewpoint. What theoretical viewpoint we will use in the class? And the student is not interested in the reading material. So here we can see that this particular linguistic utterance is ambiguous in nature. So something that has more than one meaning is called ambiguous. Something that is open to many interpretation, that is known as ambiguous. So when you say is there a text in this class, it is again open to many interpretation. Now the question arises whether all interpretations are valid or not. All interpretations are not valid. So for example, there is a poem by William Black, and it says that tiger, tiger burning bright. Now, if someone says that why tiger, tiger is burning bright, a person says that, oh, a hunter has consumed the flesh of the tiger and there is a problem in the stomach. This is my interpretation, that the hunter first kills the tiger and then consumes tiger's meat, and because of that there is a problem in the stomach, and because of that the hunter is singing this song, tiger, tiger burning bright. Do you think that type of interpretation is valid? No. But who will decide that a particular interpretation is valid or not? And for that, Fish gives a concept known as interpretive communities. Is it interpretive communities? It is interpretive communities rather than either the text or the reader that produce meaning. So what is responsible for the meaningfulness is not the author. What is responsible for the meaningfulness is not the reader, but the interpretive communities. So getting a meaningfulness of a particular text requires a sanction or validity of a community, and that community you will not find anywhere like, okay, these 20 people are the president and chairperson of that community. You will not find that, because this interpretive community is invisible in a manner that you won't find. But there is some consensus in terms of like these meanings are valid and these meanings are not valid. And how you will decide? So some reputed publications, they are publishing the material, journals are publishing articles, likewise, and professors, they are delivering a lecture, and then they ascertain in a manner that, okay, these things are valid, these things are not valid. Similarly, who will decide that these texts are classics and these texts are pulp fiction? You will not consider a novel written by Chetan Bhagat as a classic. No, classic is something that you will keep safe in your library. I don't think that you will keep Chetan Bhagat's novel Half Girlfriend in a library for 50 years. Because you know there is only one meaning in this novel. In 4 hours you can complete Half Girlfriend, but you can't complete Pride and Prejudice in 4 hours. And I was reading at one place that Winston Churchill said that I read Pride and Prejudice 20 times. And even Winston Churchill recommended that someone who wants to improve one's communication skills, then one should read Pride and Prejudice as many times as possible. So Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen is a classic, but Chetan Bhagat's Half Girlfriend is not. Who has decided this? This interpretive communities. So Fish further states that the meanings are already conditioned by the situation in which it was uttered. So it's not the case that we have uttered something and then it is getting a situation. No, the other way around. Situations are already there in our mind. Situations are already there in the mind of the speakers. And what situation? All the knowable contexts that are already there in the mind. And once something is uttered, just we try to match the following. So we try to match, okay, these 10 situations are in our mind and let's try to match. If I say, I saw a white dinosaur in my garage in the morning. If I say like this, I saw a white dinosaur in my garage this morning. So what you will do? You just try to match this utterance that how is it possible that a white dinosaur in a garage, then you will come to the conclusion that the person is talking about a toy, a graffiti type of thing that the person saw in the garage. So this is like knowable context transforms text into discourse. So this is quite important for us, and the similar statement is said by Wittgenstein in his philosophical investigation, when Wittgenstein says that meaning of a word is its use in the language. So a word has a meaning, a sign has signifier and signified inherently associated with that, but that is not all. What is important? The context that is important. So we can say that context precedes sentence, or context precedes utterance. And because we know that knowable context transforms text into discourse. So we will fall back to context in which we are accustomed to hear such utterances. When I said think of a bird, none of you might have thought of penguin, kiwi and ostrich, because we will fall back to context in which we are accustomed to hear such utterances. So when someone said that Derrida is too difficult to read and understand, why is it so? Because we are not accustomed to read such type of text. So decontextualized text does not mean anything but matching to a context. So it's not the case that when we are decontextualizing a text, we are going out of the context. Again, we need to take care of the context very well. So with this, we can make a conclusion that meaningfulness or understanding requires situational competence also. So it's linguistic competence is not enough, but situational competence is more important than the linguistic competence. So now we have two types of competence here. One is lingual competence, that is narrow, and situational competence, that is broad. So words themselves do not determine the meaning, but rather the context, the discourse in which they take part. So words are simply tools that we have, and because of the situations in which they are occurring, they get more meaningfulness. And when we say that when we read some out of the blue interpretation by Derrida, Bloom, or even by Fish, is that interpretation valid? Because we have raised this question that tiger, tiger burning bright is a dietary problem. If this is the interpretation, then whether such type of interpretation is valid or not. And we said, no, this type of interpretation is not valid at all. Then what will happen to the interpretation that provided by Derrida, Bloom and Fish? Then the answer is provided by M.H. Abrams, because M.H. Abrams says that literal normative meanings were overruled by stubborn interpreters. So when we talk about Bloom, when we talk about Fish, when we talk about Derrida, what they actually did, they imposed their meaning on us. So there is one plus point of imposing a meaning, and there is negative point of imposing one's meaning on other. Either you will become very much successful like Derrida, Bloom, and Fish, or people will think you mad. You might have seen a mad person and you declare that that person is mad. Mad person is also imposing his or her meaning to us. And Derrida, Bloom, and Fish, they also impose their meaning to us. Then what is the difference? The difference is simply that they not only impose their meaning, but they convinced us that what they are thinking is correct, that is right. So this is like these three, like Bloom, Derrida, Fish. I'm just mentioning a few. You can include like Zizek, or let's say Deleuze and Guattari and other or as well. So then they not only simply impose their meaning, but they convinced us that the way they think is new, novel, creative, that is, but they are stubborn interpreters. Now we will look at how we can analyze a text, any text that is given to us, and how we can utilize the knowledge that we have gained to any text. Now let's say, look at this text. Very few words are there. I read it for you. Almighty God, our heavenly Father, who of thy tender mercy didst give thy only Son Jesus Christ to suffer death upon the cross for our redemption, ... Now if I say, okay, this is a text for you, a blind text, now you need to interpret it. What you will do? You will realize, okay, it is a liturgical prayer, variety is religious English, usage is church service, and you will say, and I say like, and what else? And you will say, God gives his only Son Jesus to save human beings, and he died for us. That is all. That is all meaning that is associated with that. But this is not the way a critic thinks. This is not the way a student of literature interprets a text. Then what else? So my point is that if you have some linguistic knowledge, then you can analyze a text deeply. How you can do that? Think of like the words that are here. Now, when it comes to Almighty God, what type of thing it is? It is in the vocative case, Almighty God. So you are just making a vocation to God. You are just evoking God. Then the Father is in capital F and Son is in capital S. That is also providing some information to us that we are not talking about the worldly biological relationship between Father and Son. We are not talking about that. We are talking about this spiritual relationship between Father and Son. Now, what type of word order is this? Who of thy tender mercy? We do not use such type of word order in English at the present time. We will say the tender mercy of whom in place of who of thy tender mercy. Then we are using some archaic words like didst. Fine, here we are using thine, thy. So what type of information it is providing? It is providing that, because we know that didst, thy, thine we do not use in the present time. So that means like this text is an old text. That information also we have. At the same time, we have word like suffer, death, cross, and redemption. And we know like these three words, phrases, they are associated with each other. And this is the example of collocations that we have. So when we have linguistic knowledge, then we can analyze a text deeply, though we do not know much about it. So what, in place of simply saying God gives his only Son Jesus to save human beings and he died for us, we can say the text begins with a vocative expression that directly addresses God, by which the connection between the addressee and addressed is well established. We can also say also the inversion of syntax topicalizes God, but this time it is substituted by the relative pronoun whom. We can also say the archaic use of the past tense did establishes its link, indicating that the prayer is quite ancient and has been used by the ancestors as well. We can also say the capitalization is an example of capitonym, which removes it from the biological relations and establishes heavenly connection. We can say the use of thy and thine is also in line with the Old English. And we can also say the collocation is well suited for the religious prayer. So as you can see that if we have little linguistic knowledge, or if we just pay close attention to the text, that is also known as close reading, then we can have a finer interpretation than a simple line that God gives his only son Jesus to save human beings and he died for us. So we have seen what is text, we have seen what is textuality, context and discourse. Now two terms which are associated with text and textuality, that is intertextuality and intersubjectivity. That we will also discuss a little. So first of all, this intertextuality is a term and intersubjectivity. This term is coined by Julia Kristeva. So now when we look at intertextuality or intersubjectivity, one thing is common inter, and what is inter? Something that is in between. So when we talk about intertextuality, that means we are talking about textuality between text, and when we say intersubjectivity, then subjectivity between text that we are talking about. So the term synthesizes with Ferdinand de Saussure's semiotics, his study of how science derives their meaning within the structure of a text. So there is a concept like dialogism. So what is dialogism? That is quite important with this term intertextuality. When we say intertextuality, that means one text is talking to another text is talking to another text. So endless talking we are talking about. So that means like one text that is written, that text is not written in isolation, and that text must not be read in isolation as well. So if you have good knowledge of the previous text, 1 to hundreds, then you can have a fine layer of meanings. You can have a fine layer of multiple meanings, that is known as heteroglossia. And Bakhtin uses the term dialogism, that is a continuous dialogue between other works as well. So Virginia Woolf said this thing at one place: if you have read 1,000 books, then your words will flow like a river. That is the essence of heteroglossia, that is the essence of intertextuality. If you have read 100 novels, then your words will flow like a stream, not like a, if not like a river. So the meaning is like you need to communicate with one text and another text. You need to jump from one text to another text. Then you can have finer layer of meaning. And at the same time, intertextuality is more important than intersubjectivity. And nowadays, intertextuality replaces intersubjectivity. So meaning is not transferred directly from writer to reader. That is not happening. And if it is happening, then it is not a good text. So if you are reading Half Girlfriend by Chetan Bhagat, then what is happening? Simply writer has written Half Girlfriend and you are reading that Half Girlfriend. Meaning is simply transferred in an intersubjective manner from writer to reader. And there is no mediation. That is not the example of a classic. But when you read Pride and Prejudice or any other type of text, then this thing is not happening at all. So the meaning is not simply transferred one to one, but it is mediated through, filtered by codes imparted to the writer and reader by other texts as well. So intertextuality is important than the intersubjectivity. Then we have these two terms like intertextuality, then hypertextuality. So hypertextuality is associated with the computer display that we have on electronic devices. For example, like what we are doing, it is an example of hypertextuality. Also, we have hyperlinks. So we read something, then there is a hyperlink. We click on that link and we reach to another page immediately. That is also the term that we have. Then hypertext is a text that alludes, derives from, or relates to an earlier work, or hypertext, that is a hypertext example. So these words I am discussing because these are also associated. Then we have a concept like a meta text. So meta text is a writing that reflects on writing, like we have a meta language. So similarly, we have meta text. So this is the thing. And one more thing that I would like to say, that at one place Derrida in his book titled Of Grammatology, published in 1976, said nothing outside the text. And many people, they misunderstood it and they think like the text I am reading, everything I will get in this text. This is not the meaning. Derrida says like if you want to understand this text, then you need to follow intertextuality. That means you need to jump from this text to another text. Don't try to find out the meaning of a text outside the text, and not only in this text as well. So that is the essence of the Western tradition thought, that textuality means that reference is not to external reality, the assumption of much Western thought, but to other text. So we need to move from one text to another text, to another, to another, to another. It's an endless process. And then we will have this capacity that when we speak, our words will flow like a river, as Virginia Woolf said. So I stop here and thank you all for your patient listening. And if you have any doubt or question, you can ask me. I stop here. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Participants, anybody ask questions? Kartika, continue.
Thank you, sir. It was an informative session. As we are moving to the end of the session, now I call upon Ms. Sweta from First MA English to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good evening, everyone. I feel honored and privileged having an opportunity to offer the vote of thanks on this one-day webinar on textuality and disclosure.
Hello, sir.
First of all, I would like to thank our webinar speaker, Dr.
Yes, sir.
Sir, hello.
Yeah,
sir.
we can hear you. Yeah.
Bala sir, can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, always audible. Yes, sir. Saranand, sir.
Yeah.
Saranand, sir. Any disturbance?
Hello.
Yes,
Bala
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Saranand, sir.
Sir, can you hear me, sir? Sir, just a minute,
Yes,
sir.
yes, your voice is audible.
Yeah, right, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
And Amitabh, sir, your session was really interesting, and we really learned a lot of things from your session. And I just want to know, Chin in his, I think, writer, Chin in his redefining context in research and writing, stated that the context of reading is a significant factor in our conception of meaning construction. And does this contextual reading focus on cultural and social factor? And a reader, whether he should understand the cultural and social factors before he reads a text.
Yes. So what I have understood from your question or your observation, you need to think of this one phrase given by Bhaktin, that is total living totality. That means like when we consider a context, then something that is occurring is not in isolation, it occurs, but it is like a totality, something that is in total that we need to understand, whether irrespective of the thing we are reading, something we are writing, whatever the language resource we are using. So this context, not only the context of one context, two contexts or three contexts, but the living totality of that context, that is important. And other thing is that the situational competence gives us this insight to find out that which context is appropriate to interpret a particular type of text, any type of text. So both these things are important: situational competence that we already have, or gradually we will gain. And because we have a situational competence, that means we know about hundreds and thousands of contexts where such type of thing can be said, and then we start interpreting. And then when we read, then the things becomes more meaningful to us. That I want to say.
And sir, I do need one more clarification. And And I believe that this changes view. It is contrary to Rolabard's view, where Rolabard stated that it focuses on interaction of the reader and not the writer.
Because what in the Barth, like Barth, because some of the Barth's writing is structural and some of the Barth's writing is post-structural. So there is a possibility that in Barth you will find that he is contradicting himself as well, because at one phase of his life he wrote something that is very strictly related to structural, and then one phase of his life, later phase of his life, he wrote something that is post-structural. So Barth is not a reliable source for us in that matter, because sometimes he is contradicting himself when he writes post-structuralist writing.
Thank you, sir.
Shweta?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Now present the vote of time.
First of all, I would like to thank our webinar speaker, Dr. Amitabh Vikram Dwivedi, who has shared his views on text and textuality. Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable presence, and your ideas have enlightened us. I extend my heartfelt thanks to our secretary, sir, and principal ma'am and director, sir, for the enormous support and guidance to make this event. And I express the most sincere thanks to Mrs. G. Kameshwari, Head, Department of English, for her tireless efforts to make this webinar a grand success. And I also wish to express my gratitude to all the hardworking and dedicated faculty members of our English department for their constant work in all the time. And finally, I'm grateful to thank all the faculties, research scholars, and students for their gracious presence. Once again, I thank you all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Shweta. Thank you, sir. Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you.
Presentation. Thank you, sir. Thank you
Okay,
for
thank
your
you.
invitation. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.